Hey, you guys. Welcome to day 4 of the 12 days of Christmas. Got my stereotypical Canada holiday sweater on, so I had to do some lips to match and really get into the Christmas spirit. I've got my holiday treat that I just finished, which I love. And I hope everybody's having a super happy Tuesday. Did I say it's Wednesday? Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Yeah, it's Tuesday. Sorry. Clearly I need to gather myself. It's Tuesday. I hope everybody's having a fabulous Tuesday. And today, on the 4th day of Christmas, I wanted to share with you my top 3 parenting books that have, I believe, really armed me with some great tools. Not only these concepts in these books, I read a ton of parenting books, okay guys, when I was pregnant, like a ton. And if you are a pregnant or new mom and you're wanting tips on books for specific stages of early childhood, hit me up privately and I will share with you some of those books. I have read lots of fabulous books that I really think helped me when it came to those early days raising my children. But these 3 books I'm going to share with you today, I wanted to pick books that were not stuck to like one type of parenting style. I wanted these books to be something that anyone could read and gain valuable information from. And these are also books that are applicable no matter what stage of parenting you're at. So whether you are pregnant or whether you are a mom of, children who are going into their teen years, I think these books are going to be valuable for you. So these are kind of more general parenting books. They're not specific to any one type of parenting, if that makes sense. Okay. So the very first book that I want to share with you is this one. It's called Raising Happiness: 10 Simple Steps for More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents. This, guys, I think, actually, I really feel like, honestly, you should read all 3 of these books today. I really feel like they complement each other really well. But if you're like me and you realize that in today's day and age, right now, the world as we know it now, okay, the types of kids we are raising, let me backtrack. What we're seeing right now in the kids that have been raised, I feel there's a disconnect. And I believe that now more than ever, people are really starting to be mindful and conscious and parent with intention and with purpose. And if you're like me and you're realizing that what you want to put into the world 10, 15, 20 years from now, or even 5 years from now, whatever that human is that you're growing and raising and creating, if you're realizing that what you're doing with them today is impacting our future, like these are the people this is our future, okay? So if you're like me and you're on this path of wanting to really be intentional with your parenting, really understand the psychology behind raising children and what it means to raise human beings and cultivate and nurture these humans to become amazing people, then I think you will love these books, because that's what all these books do. So this first book, Raising Happiness, like this is the one that you want to read. You're going to want to read it over and over. It breaks everything down into, like it says, 10 simple steps. And they are basically steps, principles, ways, things to keep in mind that will help you raise happy kids. I mean, we've all been there, right? Like I see it all the time when I'm out in public or I go to a social function. If there are kids there, I'd say more often than not, I almost always encounter kids who are unhappy. They seem like they're miserable, they're unhappy to be there, or they're just and it's not just one time, it's like repeatedly. I'm repeatedly seeing kids who are unhappy these days, and I think there's a root cause of that, okay? Unhappy kids are made, not born. When we are born, and you guys know I'm taking a course in miracles right now, and I'm really diving deep into all this spiritual stuff, and I truly believe this, that when we are born, we only know love. That's it. Everything else that we learn about life, about feelings, it's all taught to us. We are born with just love. Everything else is taught. Everything else is learned. whether it's taught on purpose or not. I'm not saying, our parents teach us fear or hate or anything like that. I'm just saying it's learned. Just it's a consequence of living in a world that is in the state that it is today, right? So we've all seen those kids that are miserable, unhappy, they're bratty, right? You name it. If it's consistently showing up, I would say they're probably unhappy kids. And for me, it's very important to raise children who are happy and they're enjoying life, and where they are, there is always happiness. And so I read this book when I was pregnant. I wanted to get into the right mind frame because I know that raising happy, well-adjusted, productive members of society doesn't just happen by accident. That's the hard part about parenting, right, guys? The hard part of parenting is not the sleep deprivation. If you're a new mom, I'm going to tell you right now, yes, it's hard. I've been there, right? Sleep deprivation with small babies, not easy. That's not the hardest part of parenting. The hardest part of parenting is every single thing that comes out of your mouth, every single action you take, everything you do, having to make it purposeful and intentional 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, until they're not kind of under your care anymore. That's the hardest part of parenting, is knowing that you are directly affecting and influencing another human being and how they are going to be in this world. So to me, it is really important to be very intentional in everything I do as a mom, everything I do as a parent. Yes, I make mistakes like everybody else, but children are very resilient and they're very pliable, right? So as long as your heart is in the right place, I truly believe that we can all raise happier kids. So I'm just going to give you a quick few bullet points on this book. This would be a great book for anybody right now who's a parent who feels like they want to do more, maybe as a Christmas gift. Maybe you know someone who's pregnant. Maybe you know someone who's kind of just struggling as a mom. Maybe you know a single mom who's struggling and she feels like her kids are not happy right now. Whatever it is, I highly recommend this book. So these are direct quotes from the back of the book. The best way to avoid raising a brat. Changing bad habits into good ones, the trap of trying to be perfect and how to stay clear of its pitfalls, the right way to praise kids and why too much of the wrong kind can be just as bad as not enough, the spirit of kindness, how to raise kind, compassionate, and loving children, and strategies for inspiring kids to become more self-motivated, which I think we really need in today's day and age. So some of the other things this book touches on, which really align with my heart, one of the first ones, I think one of the first chapters in this book is about self-care, right? Putting your own oxygen mask first, putting that on before you do anything else, because you simply cannot give to other people what you do not have. I will say this till the day I die. I don't care if you're a mom that's just like put 110% into her kids and you think that that's serving you. I promise you it's going to catch up with you one day. You have to nurture yourself, and it comes up in this book as well. If you want to raise happy kids, you got to be happy yourself. So start with yourself. It touches on the village, right? Bringing the village back and making sure that it's not just you that's raising your kids, but that they have a village of people that are touching them in different ways. It talks about expectations, enjoyment versus perfection, choosing gratitude and how to instill this in your children. They talk about how to raise their emotional intelligence. This is another thing that I think we are missing in today's society with young kids. Is there's a disconnect there with emotional intelligence, which I also think social media and technology has a lot to do with that as well. How to form happiness habits. There's a whole chapter on how to form happiness habits and instill these in your children, and also teach self-discipline. So that's just kind of like a little gathering, a little summary of some of the bullet points from this book. But this is one of those books, like I said, there's so much wisdom and empathy in this book, and there's a lot of data in this book, okay? So if you're like a science geek like me and you want to see the research and you want to see the data, this book has it. There's lots of studies that they show, different ways that they have measured or tested what creates happy kids. And so that's all in here. And it's an easy read. It's like 180 pages, like about 180 pages, super simple read. You're gonna get a lot of value out of just this one book alone. Highly recommend it. Raising Happiness by Christine Carter. Okay, so that's the first book. Next book that I highly recommend, and if you follow me over on Instagram, you'll know that last month or a couple months ago, I went to Mexico on a anniversary trip with my husband, and it was just he and I. And for the first time since our kids were born, it was just the two of us with nobody else around for a week. And I knocked off about 7 books, I think, that week. And I have read many of Dr. Shefali Tsabari's, I think I'm pronouncing that right, books, but I hadn't read this one yet. And I would say this is another one that if you are a parent, especially if you are starting to, I think as we parent, we start to kind of get in touch with our spiritual side and just understanding that there's some things that are beyond our control, and really realizing that our children are also our teachers. If you're in that space of just being open-minded in that area, you're going to love this book. It's called The Conscious Parent, and it's by Dr. Shefali Tsabary. I want to say Tsabary. Transforming Ourselves and Empowering Our Children. This book is basically talks about how to be a fully conscious parent so that you can parent with intention. And like what it says here, Eckhart Tolle, who actually gave a little kind of forequote on the cover here, becoming a fully conscious parent is the greatest gift you can give to your child, right? Like how many of us are just on autopilot right now? Especially with the state of the world the way it is today, with social media and all of our demands. Work isn't 9 to 5 anymore. Work is like from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to bed, you're constantly tuned into this different world. Getting back to mindfulness, intentional parenting, conscious parenting, purposeful parenting is truly the greatest gift you can give not only your child, but our future. Our children are our future. And so I always say, please join me, because I'm trying to raise our future. I just have 2 kids, and I'm doing my best to put 2 amazing humans out into the world that are going to be our future. So please join me in that. And these are some of the things that you can do. And this book is really a fabulous way to open your mind to the fact that children are just much more than these little beings that come onto this planet that we cultivate and raise. It really opens your mind to the fact that our children are our spiritual teachers. And she talks about this in the book, and I mean, it really depends on your belief system, but if you're open to this, she talks about the fact that children do not belong to us. They are not our possession. They come through us, and it is our job to guide them and nudge them into life. But it's not our job to control them and to make them be what we want them to be. And it's a very powerful read. Again, another easy read. She tells it in the form of many short stories. She's got a PhD. She's a psychiatrist, and she shares many stories from her own life as a mom and her learnings and her teachings. And she works with parents on a regular basis. I think that's like her primary practice now, is working with parents. So she really talks about, just being like fully conscious as a parent and fully awake to knowing that our children don't belong to us, and that our children are meant to learn from us, but we are also meant to learn from them. They are essentially our teachers as well. And, if you guys listen to me talk, you know that I talk a lot about the 4 Agreements and Don Miguel Ruiz. He also wrote another book called The Voice of Knowledge. So if you're into that stuff, I highly recommend this book. And it just talks about the fact that we come into this world completely blank, and everything that I tell you that I know today is really a result of something I was either taught by my parents, a culture that I was born into, the society around me, the way the world is everything that has kind of like, I was a blank canvas, and then all of these impressions have happened on me as I've grown up, right? And now as an adult, I'm 42 now, so I've had 42 years of all these impressions being kind of put on me. And a big part of that is our parents and the people we spend the most time with. And so the Voice of Knowledge really talks about deconstructing that and getting back to a place of just getting in touch with who you are. And this book kind of expands on that as well, just talking about the fact that we need to be very mindful that we are our children's world, and their thinking of the way the world works, their impression of how the world is and how life is, what's right and wrong, a lot of it comes from how they're being raised. So there's some serious truth bombs in this book. She even talks about the fact that a lot of people should really question whether they are ready for this huge job of becoming a parent, because she thinks people take it too lightly, and I agree. Being a mom now, I mean, you could never tell that to me when I was in my late 20s or early 30s desperately wanting a baby. But the truth is that if you realize how powerful it is to be a mom, to be a parent today, what you are doing is essentially raising another human being. If you really sit down and look at what that takes to do that job and to do that work, it's a lot, so she talks about that in the book, and I've heard her give several interviews where she talks about the fact that we need to just take a breath and take a break and not feel like we are having kids because it's just the right thing to do. We should be doing it because we truly feel we can take on the job of bringing something that's coming to us that doesn't belong to us, that we are now going to grow and nurture and then set it off out into the world. And so it's a very powerful read. Maybe this book isn't for everybody, but I would say this is for anyone who is open-minded to the kind of spiritual world, who's open-minded to the thought that children do not belong to us. If you're open to those kinds of things, I think this is a great read. So again, would make another great Christmas gift. You can put it on your list and ask for it. And then finally, my third book, my favorite book, and I have to say, I saved this for last because I saved the best for last. I don't have many regrets, okay? In life, I don't have many regrets, and in parenting, I don't have many regrets. I just learn, I do better, and I move on. I rarely look back and go, I wish I would have done this. If I were to name one regret I have, it would be this book, and that I did not read this book sooner. I didn't read this book until just a couple years ago, whereas, a lot of the other parenting books I read when I was pregnant, and I feel like they really set me up for success in many ways. And I truly believe that, reading pregnancy books and what to expect when you're expecting, that's great and everything, but the true books you should be reading when you're pregnant should be the ones that are going to influence your parenting, because once the baby comes, it's oftentimes hard to read. So I always encourage parents to read books like this when they're pregnant to really get into that right mind frame. I wish I would have read this book when I was pregnant. I did not. I probably would have done things a little bit differently had I read this book before my kids were born or when they were very young. But better late than never. This book is called Hold On to Your Kids. It is Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. And it's by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate. And if you haven't heard of them, they're basically like a doctor and a psychologist who have partnered up to write this book. Gordon Neufeld is actually from here in Vancouver. He's a clinical psychologist. And Gabor Mate is an MD, and he works a lot. He's like an authority on stress, mind-body kind of connections, ADHD, parenting, addictions. He travels extensively and teaches this stuff like all over the world. So they talk in this book about attachment and attachment theory. And I have studied attachment theory deeply. And this book really kind of connected it all for me from a parenting and momming standpoint. Really, the idea behind this book is how to raise children to be productive, happy members of society who are not carried away by the external things. And reading this book, I had a lot of aha moments because I was raised in a very strict home, a very strict Indian home. We had a lot of rules, cultural rules and house rules, and there's always something to follow. And I see many of my friends today who are raising kids, and they say, well, I can't be that strict with my kids because they'll just rebel. And, I always kind of thought to myself, and my husband was raised the same way, very strict. And I always have wondered, why is it that my husband and I didn't really rebel? we were raised in very strict homes, very strict. Like people hear me talk today and they just shake their head and can't believe some of the things that I wasn't allowed to do, but that's just because it's not their normal. But that was my normal, and I just thought my parents were very strict, and we have a very strict culture, and I was okay with it. But it never caused me to be rebellious. It never caused me to kind of like go against my parents' wishes and, you know, go hang out with my friends and tell my parents off. Like I just never was a problem child in that way. And I never really knew the answer to why. And then I read this book and I realized that the reason some people can endure growing up in very strict homes without ever rebelling is the difference between that and somebody who does rebel comes from the attachments that you build with your children. Okay, so this basically talks about building such a strong attachment with your kids, physically, emotionally, all of it, so that there is never a hole that they need to fill with their peers, or that they need to fill with addictions or substances or drugs or anything as they start to get older. And it really talks about keeping your kids close to you physically and emotionally, and different ways that you can do that. And, you know, I never really understood attachment parenting, quote unquote. Like you always hear this term thrown around about attachment parenting. And I just thought that meant like you're co-sleeping and you're breastfeeding your baby until they're, you know, 2. And I didn't really understand it. And then I read this book and it made so much more sense to me. So I instantly started to apply the principles in this book. I mean, we always kind of have done a lot of the stuff in this book, but now as my kids have started school, this is one of the reasons I wanted to homeschool, is I read this book and realized the importance of maintaining those attachments. So not to say that you have to homeschool to have that attachment with your kids, but it's definitely a big component. That physical closeness with your children is so important. And, you know, I won't get into the details because I really think everyone should read this book. It's so important, you guys. And I see it. I see the kids that are being raised now that are in their teens who are not, they don't have any troubles. They're not problem children. They've never had any issues with their parents. And the principles that the parents lay out to me and the things that they share with me that they've done with their kids are many of the things that are laid out in this book. So it really just talks about the importance of building that intuitive child-parent bond and how to do it so that you are not in a place where peers have filled the hole that you've created or filled the spot where you should be as a parent. This is honestly, I cannot say enough good things about this book. If you are into child psychology or psychology at all, and you are in a place where this is important to you and you really are thinking ahead about what life looks like with teenagers or with young, you know, kids moving into the teenage years, this is a book to read. This also talks about the village, right? And how important it is to surround kids with a village of other people who are like-minded to you. So your family, their grandparents, their siblings, their aunts, their uncles. And that was a big part of us being raised, right? Like we were raised in a culture which was very tightly knit. My parents had a lot of close friends and everybody was your uncle or your aunt, and they were all kind of, it was okay for anybody to discipline you, and it was okay for anybody to treat you like you're their child. It was the village, and that's really important. And they also have an additional chapter in this book now, or there's a couple chapters on raising children in a digital world, because that's a whole other topic, right? Raising kids in a digital world, how do you make sure that they're attached to you and not to the technology? So this is I highly recommend this book. And again, you guys, all 3 of these books I think are great for anybody, from someone who's pregnant to someone who is raising, I mean, I want to say even teenagers, although I know that once you get into those teenage years, it's really hard to reel them back in, right? But, you know, if you've got somebody who's 11, 12, entering those teenage years, I think any of these books will be beneficial. It's always easier to start early. The earlier you can start, the better. Start as you mean to go, but never too late. So this is the final book, Hold On to Your Kids, by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate. That's it. Those are my 3 books. that was the 4th day of Christmas. I hope that was valuable for you. As always, pop your questions or comments into the comment section. Private message me, and I'll be here same time tomorrow to talk about what am I talking about tomorrow? Oh, tomorrow is going to be kind of fun. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about my top and favorite must-have multi-purpose things that I use in my house in many different ways. So I have a few things that I use in my home that have multiple purposes, and I just think that every home should always have these in their kitchen or stocked up somewhere. And so I'm going to share those with you because I think that they're going to make your mom life a little bit easier, and I'll give you some cool kind of tips and ideas on ways to use these grocery items. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, noon Pacific, for day... I think I'm getting my days mixed up. Tomorrow's Wednesday. Today's day 4. And tomorrow's going to be day 5 of the 12 days of Christmas. That's what's going on. Sorry, my brain's a little bit slow today. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys tomorrow.